try and put the importance of the Charter in some economic context as well. I chair a group called the Left Economic Advisory Panel that brings together a group of left economists just to talk about issues confronting the economy and to provide advice to unions and trade union movements, wider labour and trade union movement on economic issues. We've been looking at the current economic position and trying to do some projections over the coming period. Some of you will have seen in the papers this week that the government's own figures demonstrate that this last month the government deficit, just in that month, the difference between expenditure and income was hit over £11 billion. That means in the first 6 months of the year now, the government deficit has gone up to about 90 billion. They were projecting, if you remember, there would be 175 billion deficit in this coming year. It looks as though, because of the increase in employment and because of the significant increase in employment, because of the fall in tax revenues, that might balloon now to about 190 billion. Normally, what would happen in this situation is that you'd be looking for a combination of things to tackle that situation. One would be the return of economic growth. Now, some of you may also have seen this week that the OECD predicted that the UK economy will grow at no more than about 1% over the next few years. Alistair Darling thinks it's going to be 3%, but that's Alistair Darling. Let's not dwell on that. His projections so far are not really particularly accurate, and neither is Brown in terms of solving boom and bust. But the general feel across, I think, those economic commentators is no more than 1%. But if you look at some of the work that Graham Turner has done, who's a member of the Left Economic Advisory Panel, about the fragility of the property market in the States still, and the fragility of the US economy generally, there's real fears and concerns now across a group of economists that are saying, well, maybe actually it isn't even 1% growth, and what we could find in the next 6 months is a double-dip recession, this concept of the double dip, you hit the bottom, bounce back, and then bounce back down again. Now, on that basis, £190 billion deficit, at best the government produced £175 billion. Limited economic growth, if none at all. The only other opportunity then to resolve the problem is to look at tax increases. But what we have is a commitment right way across the piece from all the main political parties in opposition to increasing the tax take, either by increasing taxes on the corporate sector, which is where the real money is, or even though there's some gestures made towards it, but even tackling tax evasion and tax avoidance. And as we know, the Tax Justice Network, working on behalf of most of us, have identified £150 billion a year in terms of tax avoidance and tax avoidance for the corporate sector. But none of the political parties look seriously at tackling any of that. So therefore, what's been brought forward, and it's right away across all the main political parties, is a policy which is about tackling the deficit by cuts in public expenditure. And it's interesting the consensus that there is. The Labour Party, New Labour now, have come forward with their budget statement, their pre-budget statement preparations. The pre-budget statement will be here in a few weeks' time. But in the Queen's speech, you'll have seen the government introduced its legislative proposal for a fiscal responsibility bill. And it gives a commitment that within 4 years, the government will reduce the budget deficit by at least 50%. To arrive at 175 billion or 190 billion pound cuts, you've got to do something about welfare benefits as well if you want to achieve that scale of the cuts. And what it means, basically, just as a straight extrapolation, is reducing the single person's unemployment benefit from 65 pounds as it is now down to 49. Or it means increasing the retirement age, which they all seem quite keen on at the moment, to 69. So virtually a drop, basically. That's the reality of their financial projections across the parties themselves. And our job, I think this is why we launched the People's Charter, is someone somewhere has got to break through this insanity, to explain why this is happening, to explain the consequences of the economic policies that are being put forward, and to demonstrate that there is an alternative. And the People's Charter is meant to start the debate on that alternative. That's what it does. In very common sense terms, it sets out our shared understanding, but it also sets out a series of policy interventions which could transform transform the whole approach to policy making in this country, and actually could transform the way in which our economy is managed and who it's managed for as well. And I think that the simplicity of the demands are actually the attraction of it, because it stimulates the debate. I'm going back to my constituency now, and I keep repeating to people until I'm blue in the face. But in my constituency surgery every week, it is, you could come out and weep, and in fact many of my caseworkers do. The number of families that I'm now seeing in housing crisis, I've now got a homelessness crisis in my constituency that is bad now as it was after the Second World War. I've got anything between 1,600 and 1,700 families who are classified as homeless and who are living in appalling housing conditions. And the simple answer to that, isn't it, is simply build the homes. And if homes stand empty, there are what we now know, don't we? There are 750,000 homes standing empty at the moment, 350,000 of them standing empty for more than 6 months. We simply occupy them. We simply occupy them and put families with a roof in their heads. That's one simple policy drawn from the People's Charter. We have homelessness, we build the homes. I think in terms of the other thing that people are crying out for in my constituency is basically decent public services rather than services that are invested in, but privatised and profits then laundered into the private sector for profiteers. And again, the element in the People's Charter which simply says that we end privatisation and public money should be for public services and not for profiteers is straightforward and people welcome. And finally, let me just say this issue as well within the People's Charter itself. We've emphasised the issues around civil liberties and we've emphasised the issues around trade union rights. The reason the Tories now are planning a further assault on trade union rights is because they know that people like us will resist this onslaught on our welfare state. And to prevent that resistance, what they'll seek to do is attack our civil liberties further, but also, more importantly, is to undermine the basis of trade union rights in this country. So explaining to people that actually at some stage in these coming months, you will be having to campaign on the streets again to protect your hospital from closure, to protect your local school from closure, and to do that you'll be facing up against a state which will seek to undermine civil liberties, but workers themselves will be, there will be a state attempting to undermine their ability to take industrial and direct action because of further assault on trade union rights. I think it's important we explain to people the nature of the struggle that we're now going into. Finally, I believe that the People's Charter could play an important role in all these discussions and all these debates, but it has to be in the context of the next general election. And I think one of the things that we can use the People's Charter for, in the same way that PCS has done in terms of the Make Your Vote Count campaign, is to approach individual candidates across all political parties and ask them what is their position on each element of the People's Charter, and in that way to inform the electorate about those people that will stand up and fight against this onslaught on public services and their communities, and those that are willing to go along with it and become part of the attack on our communities themselves. I think the People's Charter can play that invaluable role in the run-up to the general election, being the benchmark for what we can support politically and what we can't. Solidarity.